magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight? Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. There's magic coming. Get ready for the rest of your life. Hello and welcome to SassafrasCast. I am Rory Kelly. I am a tarot reader, musician, singer-songwriter, and all-around personal growth nerd from Long Island, New York. And today I am starting, I guess you would call it, a mini-series on SassafrasCast. I have decided today that I'm going to do it. I'm going to teach tarot on the podcast. And it's something I have thought about and always resisted doing for a variety of reasons. I listen to a lot of witchy podcasts, and first of all, I don't want to put out the same podcast that a bunch of people have put out, because a lot of tarot podcasts do have a let's go get to know the tarot cards, episode or 5, which I'm doing a bunch. But I have had people ask me a bunch to teach them tarot. And I do teach private lessons from time to time. I know that's not accessible to everyone, and I have in the past tried to put together like workshops, here and there, and it's challenging. It's challenging to make everyone's schedules line up, and a podcast is something you can just go and listen to at your leisure. So, introducing SassafrasCast Teaches You Tarot. It is now... this is the end of July episode of SassafrasCast. For the rest of the year, I will be teaching you tarot on this podcast. Specifically, I will be teaching you tarot for yourself and others through a lens of empowerment and self-care, which is how I read the tarot. Different tarot readers have different beliefs, and I think for me, the way to make this special and meaningful and not just yet another tarot podcast, yet another podcast about how to read the tarot cards, is to really check in with my purposes as a reader and why I do this and why it's meaningful to me. And I want to share with you, I've been reading since I was 13 years old. 13, I don't know, ish. I've been reading since I was a teenager. And my grandma was also a reader, and a very well-known reader in the New York City scene. And it's kind of big shoes to fill, and it's kind of a shame that I never got to know her when I was an adult, because she passed when I was 13. And she had read for me, and she had shared a little bit of her wisdom about the cards, but I was not a serious reader until after her death. And so in some ways, I feel that I'm carrying on her work, but also it's been a long road to get to the point where I feel that way. I have really tried to connect with her words and ideas kind of with reverse engineering, because I wasn't a serious tarot reader at the time that I knew her, and I remember a few things that she said, and over the years they have resonated with me more and more. And I'll be sharing that with you a little bit throughout these episodes. But my own purpose as a tarot reader, I have come to realize is like a calling for me. And I'm someone who uses the word calling and does not throw it around. It means a lot to me. My main calling is music. I'm a musician. I'm a singer-songwriter. That is what I believe I was put on this earth to do. And specifically, I believe I was put on this earth not to be an entertainer, but to be a healer, to use art as a medium of healing and empowerment, especially for people who have been disempowered by society at large, I guess. That is what I believe my life's purpose is, and I've come to realize over the last few months that reading tarot is an extension of that purpose. That every time I go and read the cards for somebody, I have an opportunity, and I've been doing this without thinking about it because it's who I am, to put them in touch with their own power, to create an opportunity for them to have greater perspective and for them to make choices that are grounded in their truth and their values and what means the most to them, rather than me, the tarot reader, giving them a prescriptive idea of what the future holds or what fate demands of them. I don't not believe in fate, but I also do definitely believe in free will. So yeah, are there things that perhaps kind of come to your doorstep through whatever you want to believe in, divine intervention, the universe? Maybe. Are there things that come to your doorstep because you just want them so badly that you manifest them? Maybe. Are there things that come to your doorstep because life is just life and it's chaotic and it's full of other people living and trying to make their own way in a world that is chaotic and confusing? Definitely. And similarly, we bring things to our own doorsteps and doorsteps of others through our actions and our choices. And so that's my philosophy as a tarot reader. And I know you've heard me say, if you've been listening to this podcast or ever seen the Witchy Weather Report, you've heard me say, like, I'm not going to tell you who your twin flame is. I'm not going to tell you if you're meant to be with this person, because those are decisions you have to make for yourself. And I am never going to be the tarot reader who's like, oh, well, Rory the tarot reader said we're meant to be together, and so even when it got abusive, I stayed. You know, and vice versa. I'm never going to be the tarot reader who's like, you know, dump him. If in fact that turns out to be a relationship where you both grow and you both heal, you know what I mean? I believe that the tarot should put power into our hands rather than taking it away from our hands. I believe, too, that when difficult cards come up, it's important to talk about them honestly, but it's also important to talk about them with an eye towards what's going to be empowering versus what's going to be terrifying. You know, I think, too, like, there are people out there who are like, oh, there are scammers in our industry. I think, too, there are people in our industry who maybe don't believe that they're scammers, but do espouse some pretty scary ideas. But there are people who will say, like, oh, you have a dark spell around you, pay me $100 and I'll take it off of you, you know, and scam people in that way. And I'm never going to be that kind of tarot reader. I'm going to be the kind of tarot reader who's like, here's what's going on, here's what the cards are saying, here's what you're dealing with. And I recognize more and more that when dark cards come up, people have already been going through the darkness and they're not surprised to hear it. But being able to frame it in a way that allows them to grow through it and make some choices instead of feeling powerless, that's what makes the difference between that person being able to move through a difficult situation empowered as their true selves, true to themselves, versus powerless and feeling hopeless and despondent and despairing. No one should ever leave my table filled with despair. That's not what I believe the tarot is for. So I'm here to help you connect with the tarot as a form of self-empowerment, as well as a form of empowerment for others if you choose to read for others, as a form of self-care, and a form of personal growth, because that is how I have found it to be most meaningful to me. We've got a couple patrons in the chat for our broadcast, Savannah and Judith. Hello, Savannah. I'm so glad you're back. Hello, Judith. How are you? So, I kind of skipped my regular intro to give a little mini-series intro, but let me give a shout out first of all to my patrons. If you didn't know, you can support this podcast at patreon.com/sassafrastarot for $1 a month or more. I record every episode live, and my patrons get a private YouTube link before each one so they can tune in for the live recording, hang out in the chat, ask questions, and get them into the podcast, which often makes the podcast better, to be honest with you. They also get access to my Discord server, where we talk about all things witchy and wonderful, and a shout out in each episode. So here we go. Thank you, Amanda Little, Melissa Marie, Savannah Tillett, Rachel Miller, Grayson, Millie Orozco, Ruby Marchetti, Rebecca Jones, Brittany Campbell, Ginger Dawn Studios, and Kevin P. Murphy. You notice I gave a shout out to Judith as well, who is a music patron, which gets her in as a tarot patron as well. Some of you know I'm a singer-songwriter. My attitude with Patreon, I have two, one for my tarot, one for my music, and my attitude is samey. I share both Discord servers with both sets of people. If you get access to me one way, you get the whole package. That's my vibe. So we're going to go into a witchy weather report in a moment. I want to thank you for coming here and hanging out, and I'll give you a little heads up about what the video is going to be about. I'm going to describe to you what goes into a tarot deck, what I'll be covering in both this series and this episode, and then I'll dive into the Major Arcana. But let's do the Witchy Weather Report first. I'm reading today with the Everyday Witch Tarot by Deborah Blake, with art by Elizabeth Alba. I've chosen this tarot deck for at least this episode because the Everyday Witch Tarot uses imagery that's very similar to the Smith-Waite system of tarot cards. I say Smith-Waite because Pamela Coleman Smith is the artist who drew what you may think of as the traditional tarot card. The used to be called Rider-Waite deck, but I think that's bogus, and we really ought to be giving the artist credit for the literal images that she drew that have inspired generations, you know? So I put her name first. I call it the Smith-Waite deck. Arthur Waite is the other driving force behind the deck, who was really wanted to create this deck of tarot cards. It was not the first tarot deck, but it became a very standard and popular tarot deck, and gave Pamela Coleman Smith some instructions about how he wanted, especially the Major Arcana, and also instructed her to really use her own understanding of astrology and numerology to create the minor arcana. So Pamela Coleman Smith, the artist, had a great impact on how we understand tarot today. And ultimately, the deck that she drew became the one that is kind of the standard. And many decks are what is called Smith-Waite clones, where they use different art, but have a common thread of the same imagery and basic meaning of the cards. And that is the kind of tarot deck I will be covering in this series. I will be covering the imagery associated with the Smith-Waite tarot, but I will not be limiting myself to that. I will be pulling out different decks and talking about differences between different decks, because I think that's just like practical. Now, the Everyday Witch Tarot really does use that Smith-Waite symbolism, but it's also cute and has a witch and a cat and a broom on every card, and I love it. As you all know, if you have been listening to me for any length of time, it is my big go-to it's my friendly tarot deck. Tarot says, love that deck, been on my list for years. So, let's do our witchy weather report. My intention when I pull this card is that wherever and whenever it finds you, whether you're listening to it live or a couple days later or a couple years later, because you're going back through old episodes of my podcast, if so, thank you, that it have meaning for you right when you hear it. My intention too is, what energy can we bring to the coming weeks? How can we move through these times in our highest power as our best selves for our highest good? We have here the Ten of Cups. So family is in focus, and I want to share with you, this is another piece of my philosophy as a tarot reader, which I will be just geeking out about tarot philosophy for the whole rest of 2023, so I'm sorry, you're welcome. When I see cards that are about family, I specify to the person I'm reading for that this is not just about family, it's about chosen family. Now, sometimes your chosen family and your blood family are one and the same. For many people, it's more complicated. And I want to specify that the people we welcome into our hearts as family, even if they're not blood relations, are family, and it's just as real. And the people that we perhaps have had to choose to exclude from our lives, even if they are blood relations, I can think of, for example, my grandfather was an abusive piece of crap. And I don't count him as an ancestor for that reason. The people that we've chosen to exclude from our family, even if they're blood relations, are no longer family. So when I see a card that's about family, I want to specify that. It's about the family we choose. It's about the family we make. It's about the community we build around ourselves that is based on love and connection and shared values. So the Ten of Cups is really all about that. It is the highest echelon of family. It is coming together and allowing everybody's ideas and beliefs and kindness for each other to kind of cross-pollinate and create something bigger than the sum of its parts. That is what the Ten of Cups is about. So during this time, I'm going to ask you to tune into your community and tune into what is meaningful to you about community, what is meaningful to you about family, and look at it as a resource to refill your cup, to give you perspective as you face life's challenges. Look at it as we're going through this together, not I'm going through this alone. That is the idea and belief that is going to serve you. All right, let's get into the meat of the episode. We're going to talk about the Major Arcana today. First, I'm going to describe what comprises a tarot deck. Again, we're talking about the Smith-Waite system, the original. This is not actually the original tarot deck. Tarot has been around for hundreds of years. Some of the earliest ones are the Visconti Sforza tarot deck from Italy, and the Tarot Marseille, which was French. And it was originally a game of playing cards. It was a game of trumps and not like the president. Not like the president, like in card games. And that's what the tarot was for. It was for entertainment among like noblemen, and it had like this, or noble people, I should say, and it had like this, you know, special art and illumination on every card. And was something that you really, like, you couldn't afford that kind of thing unless you were well-to-do at the time that it became popular. And now we use it for divination. And the Smith-Waite Tarot was specifically created for that purpose, for purposes of divination and for purposes of like spiritual inquiry, if you will. Arthur Waite, I believe, was a member of the Golden Dawn, which was a, you know, kind of, I don't want to say it too, I haven't done a whole lot of research into the Golden Dawn, but like, let's say like British men getting into the occult together in a kind of guild/club way. And wanted to create a tarot deck that was like reflecting on this occult symbolism and an aid in divination, as well as like, you know, spiritual questing. And Pamela Colman Smith was like a part of the art world as well as a part of the spiritual world at the time. She was a biracial artist, and was encouraged to use her own understanding of astrology and numerology, because she was known already for knowing about these subjects, in order to create the minor arcana. So she wasn't just the artist, you know what I mean? She was the artist as well as some of the inspiration, and Arthur Waite also had his own, you know, views on how the major arcana should be. Now let's talk about that. When we talk about tarot, we have major arcana and minor arcana. Arcana is a Latin word that means secrets. The major arcana, major secrets. The minor arcana, minor secrets. And really what this means is the tarot is a deck of symbols and archetypes, right? And the major arcana is the first 22 cards, I think it's 22, in the deck. And these cards are archetypes that will recur in different forms throughout our lives, and they represent big themes and big influences that will affect our lives during big times of change. The minor arcana are said to represent smaller pieces of our lives, more like the day-to-day living. That doesn't mean some of the minor arcana cards aren't real big, real doozies. You know, I think about like the Ten of Cups, I think about the Six of Swords, which is a card of like really rescue and refuge. And the Ten of Cups is like kind of the classic heartbreak card. Those minor arcana cards can pack a powerful punch as well. I think the major arcana really speaks to these universal archetypes that we all experience in our lives and at times embody in our lives. And when you have many major arcana cards in a spread, it is said to indicate that you have kind of big energies and big changes happening, a big shakeup happening in your life at this time. So I'm currently, while I talk about this, separating my deck into major and minor arcana, which I certainly could have done before the episode, but did not. And then I'll be putting the major arcana into order in just a moment. But so each tarot deck is comprised of the same 78 cards, if it follows the Smith-Waite system. And that comprises the 22 major arcana cards plus the minor arcana. Now the minor arcana is going to be similar to what you may have seen in a deck of playing cards if you've ever played Go Fish or poker or anything like that, where there are numbers from 1 to 10 and then court cards. Rather than Jack, Queen, King, as we see in like a deck of playing cards, we have traditionally Page, Knight, Queen, and King, although many different decks have chosen to alter those interpretations to be less gendered or put their own spin on it. For the sake of ease of talking about this, I will probably be using phrases like page, knight, queen, and king, but I'm going to specify that part of my philosophy as a tarot reader is that I'm a non-binary person, and I have found the gender binary to cause me more trouble than good. So I do not do gendered interpretations of the card unless it really seems like that is correct for the person I'm reading for, because their worldview and their life experiences are more important than mine if I'm reading for them. This is more about themes and ideas than about, assigning a strict gender binary to the world, which I don't believe in and which has caused me nothing but trouble, as I've discussed. So if you're looking for a super gendered tarot reader, I'm not your girl. If you're looking for someone with a more traditional view of gender, I'm not your girl. I am a queer, non-binary person who believes that the tarot should be for and about everybody and should reflect the real experiences we have in our lives, not a very traditional white heteronormative view of the world. There, I've said it. So let's talk about the Major Arcana. Many people refer to the Major Arcana as the Fool's Journey because it starts with the Fool. If I go into Rory teacher mode during this, again, I'm sorry and you're welcome. I've taught tarot to a few different students one-on-one, and I kind of have a way of teaching and sharing about it, but I'm making an effort to kind of do this from a fresh perspective so that, both so that there's a reason for me to do this podcast, and as well so that this can be kind of accessible to everybody. If you have questions along the way, if you're tuned in as a patron right now and you have questions, let me know. I'll hop right on them as soon as I see them. If you are a listener and you have questions, message me at any of the social media or just things you want to talk about or turn over in your mind. I love geeking out about this stuff. Please reach out to me. I'm on all the social media. I'm also at sassafrastarot@gmail.com. Anyway, the Major Arcana is called the Fool's Journey because the first card in the Major Arcana is the Fool. Now, the Fool does not represent necessarily, although it can, a foolish person. Generally, what it represents is someone starting very fresh, somebody brand new. And at different times in our lives, we have all been the Fool. We have all been starting on a brand new journey, even regardless of our age. You know what I mean? We've all had that experience of a fresh start. That's what the Fool is, really representing the start of a journey. So the Fool's Journey really takes us from this very innocent place of just starting out, of naivete, of hopefulness, through all of the experience and wisdom that happens over the course of a journey. So yeah, it can be analogous to a life journey, the journey of a lifetime. It can also be analogous to a smaller journey of a specific experience. And I'm going to be taking you through the Fool's Journey a little bit and talking about the different people and ideas and concepts that the Fool might experience along the way. These are forces in our lives which we won't necessarily all experience in the same order. The order of the Major Arcana isn't super important, I would say, except for the fact that it allows you to play into numerology a little bit, which can deepen your interpretation if you're into numerology. It's more about, here are different things that will affect your journey. And actually, I think it's very interesting to think about how coming into contact with these different influences in our lives in different orders can affect who we are as people and can account for some of the differences, like intersection of privilege and oppression and experiences that we've had that can really paint our worldview, you know? So I will be sharing, as I go through, kind of this idea of it's not about the order, it's about, this experience that you can have at any moment in your journey. All right, I'm almost done with my separation. I'm putting these into order at this time. If you are a patron, I will be sharing with you later on some advice for reading with just the Major Arcana cards, which is a common piece of advice to tarot students just starting out, is just read with the Major Arcana. That will give you still a very interesting reading, and I'm going to give the patrons a couple of, and their bonus episode for $5 and up patrons, a couple of readings they can do that are specifically tailored for use with the Major Arcana. But you can look up any kind of tarot spread anywhere and use it with just the Major Arcana if you choose to. In fact, if you really want to, if you're focusing on one particular area of life, you could choose to just use one of the Minor Arcana suits or Major Arcana plus one Minor Arcana suits. Like, you actually have some really interesting options when you think about dividing the deck in this way. All right, we're going to talk about the Fool's Journey. If you are listening, you may wish to either look up how these tarot cards look as you listen, like, in a browser or something, or you may wish to tune into the video version of this. Every podcast episode I put out has a video version at youtube.com/@SassafrasTarot, @SassafrasTarot. And I will be holding up these cards and sharing the imagery with you. Today, like I said, I'm using the Everyday Witch Tarot by Deborah Blake with art by Elizabeth Alba, but I chose it on purpose because it is known as what's called a Smith-Waite clone. It uses some of the same imagery that Pamela Coleman Smith put into the Smith-Waite deck. The Fool's Journey begins with the Fool. As you can see, the figure on this card is standing at the edge of a cliff. And they're not stressed, they're feeling it, they're vibing. They've got their hands in the air. On this particular deck, we have a witch riding a broomstick. She's about to jump off a cliff and find out if that broomstick will really let her fly. Now, in the traditional Smith-Waite imagery, what we have is a figure with like a set of luggage on a stick, that kind of classic like traveler archetype of like, I've got a stick over my shoulder and my worldly belongings are in it. It's this real sense of starting out on a journey, starting out with very little except for hope and desire. And there is protection embedded into this card. Although the Fool seems to be literally walking off a cliff and feeling great about it, there's also a sense of divine protection, which sometimes gets translated as beginner's luck. When we first start out doing something, there is enough kind of excited, enthusiastic energy to carry us through difficult times, to carry us through times when we might not read the room right, we might not understand all the things are at play, but there's enough kind of general protectiveness of our enthusiasm and excitement to push us through those times until we gain that experience that we need. So that's the Fool. Sometimes the Fool may come up to represent you is if you're starting a new career or a new creative journey or any type of new chapter in your life. The Fool may enter your life as a person, as perhaps a child, a new child or a new birth could potentially be represented by the Fool, or as simply someone who is either going through this phase of their life, like where they are starting a new chapter, or has that energy about them all the time, and it's a part of their personality that they're always trying new things, they're always exciting, they don't necessarily look before they leap, but somehow they come out okay. That is the Fool. I'll be sharing as I go through this both a description of the Fool's Journey and also these practical applications of like, okay, but what does this mean in a reading? We next have the Magician. As the Fool moves along their journey, they begin to gain some level of competence. They begin to form an understanding about the world and what is around them and how they can use these tools to pursue their goals. Whether their goal is to better themselves or better the world or go after something that they want, they begin to look at what's around them and they begin to make connections and they begin to see, okay, here's how I can make things work to pursue what I am going after. They're no longer just out doing their best, seeking their fortune. They're looking around and using their resourcefulness and intelligence to create the situation that they're trying to create. The Magician is very practical. The Magician always features all four elements on the card: fire, water, earth, air, as well as the fifth element, spirit. The Magician can literally be used, if you're someone who is into folk magic, as a card to really focus your intention and affirm to yourself that you have control and influence over your situation, because that is truly what the Magician is doing. The Magician is a manifester. The Magician looks at what the Magician wants to create, and they look at what's at hand, and they ask ourselves, what can I do to bridge the gap? The Magician works with what they can to affect the outcome that they want. And that is kind of the first step that the Fool grows into along their journey. They begin to gain some experience and realize, I have some influence. I'm not just thrown to fate. I can begin to create and control my own journey. The Magician, as you, may look like you leaning into your resourcefulness and trying to create what you want out of what you have. Here's what I've got. Here's the life I have and the resources I have and the connections I have and the idea I have, and here's where I want to be. Here's what I'm manifesting. Here's what I'm creating for myself, and beginning to put together point A to point B. The Magician in your life may show up as someone who embodies these traits, someone who is a performer, perhaps, because performers take what is inside of themselves and put it out into the world, which is a very magician thing to do, or even a tradesman, someone who uses their hands and creates out of nothing. So an architect, a performer, a draftsperson, someone who uses what they have to create something new and better for themselves. It might also just be about their personality. They're the kind of person who is resourceful, who's like, all right, I see where I'm going. I see what I have. I'm going to MacGyver some things together. I'm going to use chewing gum and a paperclip, and I'm going to get this done one way or another. There is a sense of belief in yourself and your power to influence the situation. If this comes up as an advice card, the Magician is urging you to use your own resourcefulness rather than rest on your laurels. It's urging you to say, okay, what can you influence? Start taking those steps, buddy. We next have the High Priestess. This is where, in the Fool's journey, the Fool learns we are not all powerful. I can influence, but I cannot control, which is actually good. We don't want to control everything. That's not healthy. We're all on this earth together. And realizes, too, that there's a deeper meaning than just the material world. There is more to their journey than what is immediately before them. The High Priestess is a mystic. The High Priestess wants to connect with their higher self. I'm trying as best I can during this series. I won't do it perfectly, but I'm trying best I can to use they, them pronouns because I want these cards to feel accessible to anyone of any gender. Anyone can be the High Priestess. You don't have to be a woman. Anyone can embody this energy. The High Priestess tunes into what is unseen. The High Priestess communes with the High Priestess's subconscious. They also tune into the energy around them, whether they consider that to be spirit energy or the universe or the fifth element spirit or, some type of deity or guide that they tune into. The High Priestess listens both to their inner voice as well as to any external voices that they believe in search of guidance. The High Priestess can be represented by a tarot reader, can also be represented by somebody who is not necessarily religious, but is spiritual, who goes within to a still place within to seek guidance for the day-to-day questions that they face. The High Priestess may be somebody who you consult for guidance, and you may find that the answers, because the High Priestess has a foot in both worlds, may be more confusing than helpful. You might go to the High Priestess, and they may give you advice that doesn't make sense in the moment, and you have to not just sort out what the advice means, you have to wait for the moment and trust that there will be a time when you can unravel what they said and it will be just what you need. As a representation of yourself, the High Priestess will come up when you are seeking deeper meaning in life, when it's a good time to tune into your own intuition or your own subconscious. As a representation of another person, the High Priestess might be someone who embodies these qualities, might be like the kind of, hippie chick spiritual person that down the street who is into all of these things and really leads a more spiritual life than the average person. And as an energy, as an advice card, the High Priestess may be advising you, look beyond what you see in front of your face. Look within. We next have the Empress and the Emperor, and I'm going to speak about them in tandem because they are a pair. And many people's interpretations of the Empress and the Emperor is that they represent the divine feminine and the divine masculine. We've talked about how I feel about gender roles. I don't like them. I am aware that these traditional archetypes that our society has, this very binary sense of what is masculine and feminine, and has influenced a lot of people in a lot of ways, so it's important to understand it. And at the same time, it's not something I wish to live my life by. So I want to distill for you the Empress and the Emperor and their different takes on life without making it super gendered. One deck that I really love that does this very well and uses different names is the Transient Light Tarot by Ari Wisner. If you look at some of the decks that are coming out by queer creators, there are some really interesting ways that we are adjusting our view on traditionally very gendered archetypes. But the Empress and the Emperor, in some ways, represent the mother and the father archetype. They're separate from queens and kings, which are represented later in the Minor Arcana, but can be thought of as also the archetypes for those two roles. The Empress, I describe as the caring, nurturing mom friend. The person who reminds you to take care of all of the basics, the person who reminds you that a little bit every day does get it done, and that baby steps are worth taking, and that slow growth is sustainable growth, and that running yourself ragged to achieve your goals isn't going to be worth it, because then you'll achieve your goals, but you'll be ragged, and you won't be able to enjoy them. The Empress is about self-care. The Empress is about nurturing. The Empress has a beautiful, gentle energy. Anyone of any gender can embody these traits. The Emperor is, on the other hand, large and in charge. The Emperor speaks with authority, is a bit of an authoritarian, because the Emperor really super thinks he's right. Now, in part, he thinks he's right because he's very experienced and has been through a lot and can probably point out some common pitfalls and get you where you're going. The Emperor has his own vision. The Emperor, as you can see here, is consulting a map and lighting the way with his scepter. The Emperor sits on a throne and expects the respect that he believes is his due based on his position in society, as well as his experience and wisdom and knowledge. Now, these are two different types of vision and nurturing. So we can think of this as like the very archetypal mother and father energy of the gentle nurturing and the kind of tough love. I'm going to tell you how it is, and I expect you to listen to me. I'm not going to tell you again twice. Gosh, I hope people aren't raising their kids in such a binary way anymore. I will say, though, the fact that this is connected with these two very binary gender archetypes can sometimes give us an unintended deeper meaning to our cards. I've had readings where the Emperor doesn't represent a specific person, it represents the patriarchy. It represents these large societal forces that are difficult to reckon with as individuals, and yet are still there, yet we still have to deal with and face. I have also had the Emperor recently, in recent years, come up for a number of women and people in the queer community and non-binary people, and I really have, as I've seen this pattern growing over the next few years, over the last few years, I've come to interpret it as the universe really inviting us to redefine authority for ourselves. I think many of us who have been oppressed by those in societal authority view the word authority and the word power with some level of distaste. We don't want an overreach of power and authority, which may be what we're used to. And yet, often I see the Emperor coming up as advice cards for these types of people, and it is asking us to step into our own authority and to redefine it. What does it look like to take power and authority and put it in a non-toxic context, right? Rather than, I'm large and in charge, I know everything, I'm right, so listen to me. What would it look like to step into our authority and also have a intersectional consideration of other people and their needs and their values, to be in our authority, to own our truth and to own our wisdom and our resources and our the importance of our view without being oppressive to others. I think that this is something that is growing right now in our society. I think that there are a number of people who want to push back appropriately against people in authority who have done overreach of power and who are oppressive and who do kind of snuff out other viewpoints than theirs and play the victim when they don't like someone else's opposing point of view, rather than welcoming everybody to the table. And I actually feel that those people who would like to welcome everyone to the table, those people who would like to see society become more equitable and more fair and more kind, need to step up into their own authority, into positions of power, so that they can guide society in that direction. Anyway, the Empress, the Emperor. It is, if you are someone like me who is critical of traditional gender roles, it's a real ride. But it's worthwhile. Here's the Empress, here's the Emperor. You can see the Empress is depicted on this card and in many decks as being actually pregnant. Now, and as a matter of fact, there are tarot readers who will look at the Empress and potentially interpret it as a pregnancy if they're doing that kind of reading. I personally try not to read about things like pregnancy and other medical conditions because I'm not a doctor. I'm a tarot reader. I never want to be the reason somebody doesn't go to a doctor for the care that they need. Rory the tarot reader said, no, please go to a doctor, please. However, the Empress does represent this sense of fertility. And we can look at the Empress as a sense of creative fertility rather than needing to associate it with like physical motherhood. Let's move on to the Hierophant. I see a couple of interesting comments that I would like to get into. Savannah says, to me, the Emperor is like the Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, which I have to tell you I haven't read or seen, but I understand what Savannah's saying here because she goes on to say healthy masculinity energy. Yes, I think we can view those archetypes and concepts in those ways, and I also think like the Emperor reversed can represent toxic masculinity. The Emperor upright can represent toxic masculinity. Context is everything. So as I share about these things, you'll hear me sharing multiple perspectives of a card, and that may feel overwhelming as you get into reading, and you'll look to the cards around it, you'll look to the context of the situation about what you're reading, and the context of the question you asked the cards before you started pulling them, to help you understand what aspects of the cards are meaningful and important here. Brittany says that Emperor energy is hard to access in a healthy way. Yeah, and also says, neat take, Savannah. Yeah, I really agree. And you know what? I will share, yeah, that Emperor energy is hard to access in a healthy way. And I'm going to share, I have a feeling it's really hard for boys and young men right now who are trying to grow up into healthy men and have such a very stratified view from society of how to be that, you know what I mean? We have this traditional masculine role that's like, don't feel feelings, just be powerful, be right and everyone else is wrong, and be competitive and win things, and don't show that you're nervous, you know, which kind of can really create toxic masculinity. And we also have a lot of talk about toxic masculinity, and I have to imagine if I were growing up male, I would be like, this feels like a friggin' minefield. You know what I mean? I think it is hard to access that energy in a healthy way because our society has put so much on it, has elevated it inappropriately, I think, put it on a pedestal above what we consider to be feminine in this society. And yeah, you know, I think because of that complex kind of circumstance in which we all contextually live, it requires some thought. Let's move on to the Hierophant. Speaking of society, the Hierophant represents our community and the beliefs in that community and the prevailing kind of sense of, if you will, like the culture and the kind of prevailing sense, the court of public opinion of right and wrong. The Hierophant has traditionally used very heavy religious symbolism. So it looks like on Pamela Coleman Smith's artwork, the Pope. It kind of looks like a pope. He's got like kind of a pope hat, and he's like very ornate and regal, and he's like, yes, I am dispensing, either I think you're a sinner or I think you're a saint, and if you give me enough gold, I'll probably call you a saint. You know, like, it's that very traditional religious iconography, and embodies all of that, right? The fact that religion can be a source of such hope and help and pathfinding to so many people, and at the same time can become corrupt so easily and can be like an empty figurehead of power, you know, in people's lives. That it can have both this political power that perhaps is inappropriate and not aligned with its religious ideals, as well as those religious ideals still having value for a lot of people. It's all of it. And often I find the Hierophant doesn't represent just religion anymore because religion is no longer the dominant thing defining our public culture. For some people it is. There are people who are in a religious community for whom that's kind of an underpinning to their whole communal life. For others, it's not. I wasn't born with religion. I didn't grow up in a religious way. And I'm grateful to my parents for allowing me to kind of like identify what I believed in and valued and cared about, you know. But I personally, when the Hierophant comes up in my life, it doesn't necessarily represent religion because I didn't grow up with it. If I was reading for someone who, here on Long Island, like there's a lot of Catholic community on Long Island. There's a lot of Irish and Italian Catholic communities where people kind of grow up and go to communion, and it's a whole thing. And I might interpret it that way, you know. It also can be interpreted as the values that drive you as a human being and the shared values you look for in your community. Community is an important word with the Hierophant. It is those things that are bigger than us because many of us have subscribed to them. So, society is also an important word. Society and community can both lift us up or make us feel very restricted, right? When we're in a community, we can feel supported. We can feel like, wow, you know, I have people around me. If I have trouble, I can get help, right? If we're in a church community, for example, we might be able to say, hey, I'm sick and I need help. Can someone drop off groceries? And someone in that close-knit church community might do it for you. And that's the positive power of community. If we're in a church community and we're like, wow, I think I might be gay, that community might or might not accept you. And suddenly those same close-knit shared values that made you feel so at home can now make you feel very alienated. And I'm here to tell you that when the Hierophant comes up, it's talking about those two things. It's talking about those extremes of the community and the society around us and those shared beliefs and how they can serve to both make us feel more connected and at times also more restricted or more alienated. And again, it's about context. So think of the Hierophant, in my opinion, more as like, what's the prevailing socio-cultural belief system and vibe around this person and how are they relating to it? And if that's a lot, directly ask the person for whom you're reading, including perhaps yourself, like, how do you feel about the culture you're living in right now? And that will begin to really help you interpret this card. Let's talk about the Lovers. We've gone from this big cultural kind of world, right, of like the immediate community and their beliefs and the society that we're raised in to the very small micro community between two people who begin to develop their own language, their own in-jokes, their own understanding of each other. And because they understand each other in this very, very deep, very idiosyncratic way, in a way that everyone else doesn't, they form this very, very special bond. The Lovers can represent literal lovers. It can be about romance. In The Fool's Journey, it's often cast as the fool's first romance. I'm here to share that it can be anything you share that kind of a deep bond with. The Lovers can be a dear friend who is always at your side, whether or not you're, you know, also doing it. The Lovers can be a love relationship. The Lovers can be another type of relationship in your life that is as deep as a love relationship. For me, as someone with a calling, as an artist, as a creator, The Lovers has represented my music to me. My depth of commitment to my music is similar to that of a marriage. And my husband is aware of that pecking order. And The Lovers, it is about commitment. But it's often about that early romantic stage of commitment where, oh, this person can do no wrong. This is so special. Wow. Oh my gosh, you know? And if you're able to contain and maintain that level of energy throughout a relationship, even as you grow, even as you face hard spots, even as you disagree, as you inevitably eventually will, that's incredibly powerful. And similarly, if you're experiencing the Lovers not as a love relationship, but as a friendship or as perhaps a calling, it's powerful. If you can still have those moments of magic that you feel, those moments of magic and connection that brought you there in the first place, even years down the line. That's very powerful energy. Sometimes the Lover shows up and it's meant to be ephemeral. Sometimes it's something that's so deep and so intense for a few, you know, brief moments of our life. And then it teaches us what it has to teach us, you know, and we go our separate ways. The Lovers can, if they come up for you, they can look like a romantic relationship, if that's related. If they come up in a different type of reading where you're not interested in love, it can look like other commitments. And I'm talking about heart commitments. commitments and values that you hold so near that you look at them the same way you might look at another person that you love so deeply. We next have the Chariot. The Fool has now integrated with different people in their world. Their mother and father archetypes, their school and community and society, special people in their lives with whom they form these very individual connections, including themselves, their own sense of resourcefulness, and their own sense of kind of deeper connection. And now the Fool is ready to get rolling. The Fool has had, in so many words, like an education. And I'm talking about like the school of life. Like, yeah, probably the Fool has had some actual schooling at this point, perhaps represented by the Hierophant. But the Fool has learned some things. They're no longer like wide-eyed and innocent. They have a little bit more of an understanding of the world, and also a little bit more of an understanding of themselves and what they want. And now they begin to feel like, okay, I've got a handle on things. I know what I want. I have an idea of what I can do. I'm going a million miles an hour towards my goal. This is about being very driven. It's the Chariot. So it is literally about being driven or driving. Here on this particular card from the Everyday Witch Tarot, we see this adorable like witch on a motorcycle. And yes, she has a little cat and her little like add-on motorcycle catty thingy, which is very cute. And she's choosing her own path. On this card, there's two signs, and one says that way, and one says this way. And as someone choosing your own path, that's tricky, right? If you're like, well, I want to get to New York, and the sign just lets you like this way and that way, you don't know which way to go to get to New York, and you have to trust your own sense of direction, right? Similarly, as we go through life and we're like, here's what I want, here's what I'm going after, here's what I'm so excited about, we don't get an instruction book most of the time. We get signs that are like this way or that way, and we have to untangle, is this way going to get me where I'm going, or is that way going to get me where I'm going? And it's not often black and white. And the Chariot represents that inner drive and ambition to be like, one way or another, I'm getting where I'm going. I don't know the exact path yet, but I know I'm going, and I'm going to keep going until I find it. It's a very high energy card. This comes up when we are goal oriented, when we're committed. It may come up as someone in your life who shares those characteristics, someone who is like on the move, on the go, knows what they want, goes hard for it. And it may come up as advice, especially if you are trying to decide what to do or what not to do, or trying to keep your doors open so you don't miss an opportunity. And the advice of the Chariot is, you need to move forward. You need to move forward towards what's in your heart, and you need to just do your best and get moving. Reminds me of the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland, says Savannah, this way or that way. Yeah, and you know, it really is that kind of energy. The Cheshire Cat in a way embodies that archetype of like, hey, the world is chaotic. You're not going to know exactly what way is going to get you where you want to go. Take your pick, you know, do your best. We next have Strength. As we move forward on our journey, so far in our journey, the Fool has learned a bunch of things, met a bunch of people, begun to formulate what they really want, and started moving towards their dreams. And now is where, as those of us who are adults know, we learn that life is not that simple, right? We learn that life is what happens while we're making other plans. We have an idea of how life is going to go, and life is like, here's how it really is. Strength comes up when we require strength, when we have been asked to be strong. The traditional imagery on this card is a maiden, a gentle maiden, and a fierce lion. And usually in the card, the gentle maiden is kind of winning, if you will, over the fierce lion. The lion trusts the maiden and is not being fierce. It's like, okay, I'll simmer down a little bit. To me, strength can represent either the maiden or the lion. Those choices of, am I going to approach this with a gentle heart, or is fierceness truly required? Because sometimes it is. You know what I mean? It does show up when situations are challenging for us. Strength means we have had to be strong. Pretty much universally. Not every card is as cut and dry. I never see strength come up in a reading where someone hasn't already had to be strong. And usually when I say those words to them, like, you've had to be strong for a while, I can visibly see, I can see them go, yes, like, yes, thank you for knowing. Thank you for seeing that. You know what I mean? If strength comes up representing a person, it is someone who you think of as a strong person. If it comes up representing you, it indicates that you are going to have to call on your strength and use that wisdom of when to be gentle and when to be fierce in order to move forward. As we go through these difficult times, we come to the Hermit. The Hermit is a timeout to connect with your inner wisdom. The Fool has seen a lot, has learned a lot, has had some tries at life, has had some mixed results, right? Positive and negative. Has been moving forward on this journey, doing their best, and hasn't gotten exactly where they thought they would be. And now this is a time for the Fool to sit with themselves and recenter. The Hermit here represents a figure around a campfire, sitting in meditation with eyes closed. They have this moment of respite where they're like relatively safe and they are in solitude and they're able to connect with what's important to them and what matters to them. This is a card about shining light on your inner wisdom. Speaking of light, the Hermit is traditionally displayed holding a lantern, indicating I hold the light. The light comes from within. It's about your own light. It's about not seeking somebody else's idea of what's true, but finding your own truth. You've been through enough now that you can begin to look at everything and begin to sort out your own truth, your own values, your own ideas. And doing so will help you move forward in your strength. After the Hermit, we have the Wheel of Fortune. The Fool's been through it at this point, right? We're only on card 10 and the Fool's been through it. There's been a lot of different experiences that they've had. They've learned that life is more complex than they originally believed it to be. And they have arrived at this sense of their own inner truth. But lest they get comfy and feel like, okay, now that I have my inner values, I know what I'm doing, the world's going to throw some curveballs. And the Wheel of Fortune is generally a positive card. In some ways, it represents the way the universe kind of has our back when we're willing to get still and show up and try to bring our best selves to the world. The Fool has just sat with themselves, and now the universe is like, yeah, guess what? You win. Good things. The Wheel of Fortune is sister to another card in the deck, the Tower, which will come up later. But both cards mean anything could happen. You may have heard me say this before, because I go on and on about it. The Wheel of Fortune is like, anything could happen. It's great. It's positive. You could win the lottery. You could inherit your unknown great aunt Esmeralda's house and start a new chapter in your life. You could, have somebody take notice of who you are and lift you up with an important connection or something. Anything can happen, and positive things happen to you outside of your control. And this is your reminder that everything isn't on your shoulders. When the Wheel of Fortune comes up, we should be aware that change is coming, often positive, but even positive change requires adjustments and still is stressful. We should also be aware not to make too many concrete plans because the context of our lives may change dramatically within the next several weeks, and we might have to scrap those plans anyway. Instead, we should act as best we can in our values and our truth and our beliefs, and leave the particulars up to the day-to-day. The Wheel of Fortune as a person doesn't come up very often, to be quite honest with you. If it was to come up as a person, someone who's happy-go-lucky, someone who kind of leaves things in the hands of fate for better or worse, and just trusts the universe. The Wheel of Fortune as you, if it represents who you are, this can represent both that good things can happen to you, but even more so that you can be a force of positive change in someone else's life, possibly without even meaning to. You may be the Wheel of Fortune if someone comes to you and is like, I've got this problem, I don't really know what to do, and you not only solve it, but you give them a level up in their life. Oh, you're not sure how to do this? Let me refer you to my friend. As a matter of fact, they might even be able to help solve this other problem for you right now. And then all of a sudden, just the dumb luck of them asking you, the right person, has severely improved their lives. The Wheel of Fortune is a way you can kind of unwittingly show up and help someone else. After the Wheel of Fortune, we have Justice. Things have transpired. We've experienced life both from our own efforts as well as from the, surprise remix that the universe offers to us. And now things are a little more topsy-turvy, right? As we go through the Fool's journey, what we learn more than anything is that life is complex and contextual, right? That it's very hard to hang on to like the one true thing, which we still may, right? We still may have like strong truths and values that lead us through, but often as we learn how much we don't know. We then get to a place where we have to decide right and wrong. Justice is about your personal call of morality. It is very contextual, although it often is represented in legal terms. There's often a scales representing that kind of timeless representation of like weighing the feather against your heart, like weighing the truth and weighing your own sense of righteousness and rightness. There's also a book here. Often a book is depicted in justice, again representing perhaps legal matters, perhaps consulting for past precedents. And justice is often blindfolded, representing what is supposed to be an impartial legal system. Now, anyone who has dealt with any legal system in any way in their lives knows that it's not that simple, right? Can it really ever be impartial? Because it's made up of different people who are all fallible in their own ways and all have their own beliefs and their own ideas. And yes, absolutely, there's like corruption and bureaucracy and all of these different forces at play. So we have to understand that justice is not the same thing as the law. It's beautiful when we can get close, when we can try to fix it and make it as close as we can be, right? But it's a moving target. And here in this Everyday Witch Tarot, something I really like is that justice is depicted as wearing a blindfold, but also peeking. She's not fully blind. Because the truth is we can't be fully blind. We have to consider context when we talk about justice. You know, we have those classic morality things about like, would you steal from someone else? No, definitely not. Well, what if you were starving and you needed to feed your hungry family? Would you steal a loaf of bread, right? Justice is contextual. Let's add another layer of context, right? What if you were like a servant at the fucking palace and you hadn't been paid and you needed to feed your hungry family today and there was bread going to waste? Would you steal that bread? Now it just seems like, take the bread. You know what I mean? Justice is contextual and it's individualized. When this card comes up as an indicator of what's coming up, it's generally positive. It generally means justice as you believe in it will be served. Sometimes it means you must act as a foot soldier of justice and look within yourself to ask yourself what that looks like. Because it's contextual and it will look at different things at different times. After justice, we have the Hanged Man. The Hanged Man is not hanged in the way that like indicates you're dead. It's not like like the hanged man has not been sentenced to death. The hanged man rather is just stuck by circumstance, often depicted hanging from a tree upside down, but alive and aware. So that's an important distinction because we hear hanged man and we're like, oh gosh, poor guy. Well, the hanged man is kind of like stuck. It is often described as being in limbo, being caught between one thing and another thing, waiting for circumstances to dictate to you how to move forward. The Hanged Man is a period in which you don't have the control that you wish you had. It's important that it comes after justice, right? Justice is it's formal and official, and it's like, here's how things are going to be, and we've all arrived at this conclusion, or someone in power has, or whatever, and this is how things fall out, and you don't have control after that point. You have to just live with whatever ruling is made. Sometimes it's a compromise, sometimes it doesn't work for you. You just have to live with the cards as they are dealt, and sometimes in those situations, we feel that there's nothing we can do. And there is that feeling with the Hanged Man of like, okay, I'm a victim of circumstance. Now, it's wise not to think of yourself for too long as a victim, although it may be true, simply for the contextual reason that if you get used to thinking of yourself that way, you may not notice the ways you can be resourceful and change your own situation. When the Hanged Man comes up, though, it's generally true. It's generally like, well, you know what? Sometimes we don't have control over what life doles out. Sometimes life gives us things that don't allow us to make empowered choices. Often in romance readings, the Hanged Man can come up when someone else is making a decision about whether to be with you or not, and you don't get to choose. You're invested, you want in, and that person is like, I'll let you know. And you're a little bit at their mercy unless you decide to walk away, which you may or may not do. The hangman similarly can come up in terms of like maybe you're up for a promotion or seeking employment, and now you've done the interview, you've done your best, and you just have to wait and find out. You've already done everything you can. That's what the hangman is about. It's about wait around and find out. You can't do any further things to influence the situation. Most people find this to be a very frustrating card. I think we like the idea of having an action we can take. It makes us feel like we're in a little bit more control of the situation. Sometimes we really do just have to wait it out. I love Savannah's comment that just came in because it's an important thing that I often communicate to people when the hangman comes up. I like to think of the hangman like an intermission. Take the time while you are waiting to handle your business and do the inner work. Yes. If you can't do anything to influence a situation, what you can do is turn inwards. What you can do is show up for yourself. What you can do is say, all right, I'm going to turn back to that hermit wisdom or that high priestess wisdom. I'm going to allow the world to do what it does because I can't influence it anyway, and I'm going to show up for me at this time. Yes, thank you for saying that, Savannah. Okay. We have reached card number 13. We're a little more than halfway through the Major Arcana. Card number 13 is Death. Death is an ending. You might notice I just said we're a little more than halfway through the Major Arcana. Death is not the final ending, but it is an ending that comes with finality. Death can represent literal death, but doesn't always. Often, this is a trope now that you've seen in fiction probably, where someone will turn over the death card and then they'll be like, oh no, it doesn't mean death, it just means change. And you know what? I'm here to tell you, there are times when death represents death. There are times when I have read someone's cards and they're like, yeah, my dad died last year. And actually, I would say there have been a little more times since COVID, because there's been a little more death since COVID. That doesn't mean it always represents death. What it represents is a final ending of a chapter. You can't go back after death. The most helpful view of death that I have found in the tarot is as that of a portal. Once you cross the threshold of this portal, there is no going back. Sometimes you really want to. Another thing that death can and does represent often in literal life is graduation. Once you graduate from school, that's a good thing. You finish school, good job, you have an accomplishment, right? Now you're going on to the next thing in your life. But also, you can never go back. You can't go back to school. If you loved it and had a wonderful time, you might be able to enroll in a new school, but you can't go back to that one. That's not possible after graduation. It's a portal. You have crossed over the threshold. You cannot go back. Death is an ending, and you can't return. That means that the life you knew is changing. So yes, death does mean change. Specifically, it means the change of an end to one chapter. Inherently, when one chapter ends, another begins. So there's a new future, but it's the unknown. And death is that moment. It's a liminal space. We are ending this new future. We don't yet know how the new future will turn out. We're ending this old chapter. We don't know how the new future will turn out. Case closed. It can be the end of a relationship, romantic or otherwise. It can be the end of a job. It can be quitting a job or being fired for a job or being laid off or any of those kind of things. Death is an ending. It is a definite ending that you don't get. Once it's over, it's over. Death is very hard to take back. And when the Fool experiences their first real big ending, it really can throw them for a loop. It's frightening. Change is frightening. Even if the Fool knows that it's necessary, sometimes we have to have an ending, right? Sometimes we break up with someone because we know they're not right for us. And that actually opens us up to have a better life. But in the moment, it fucking sucks. We hate it. We don't feel good. We feel nostalgic and we feel sad, and while we maybe know that this is what we have to do, it feels terrible. Sometimes someone breaks up with us. And that's probably for the best. We don't want someone who doesn't really want to be with us, but that also feels terrible, you know? And we wish we could have what we had, and we can't anymore. And of course, I'm putting it in relationship terms. It doesn't have to be that way, nor does it have to be about a love relationship. Death can come up at the end of a friendship, where two people decide to go separate ways, or a business partnership. Death is an ending. It requires adjustment. It's often painful. There's something that we had that we will never have again. Will there be a new beginning? You bet. But it deserves to be processed as an ending, and I think that it is reductive to just be like, death is change, it's a new beginning. We're allowed to have endings too. We don't have to toxic positivity ourselves. After death, we have temperance. Temperance really is that post-mortem time when we're looking at what was and we're trying to imagine what could be, and we're healing. We're learning how to put one foot in front of the other, even though we don't know exactly where we're going. Temperance is about balance, and it is a reminder to you, balance is not a constant state ever. Balance is always something we are doing actively. When you're riding a seesaw, rarely are you in that moment where it's perfectly balanced and you're both in the air, right? You have up and down and up and down, and that's actually what makes riding a seesaw fun. Similarly, our life is never in this magical, perfect balance, and I think sometimes this word is used in a crappy way that makes people feel bad about their imbalanced life. Balance is just something we go after. When the pendulum swings too far in one direction, we're like, oh, that doesn't work, and we try to swing it back the other way, and that's just life. We look at what's out of whack, and we try to put our lives back in whack. That is what temperance is like. And it's often triggered by an event like death, like the end of a chapter, where we're like, all right, some things have changed in my life, and now it's time to take a look, take stock, and try to get myself back in whack from being out of whack. After temperance, we have the devil. What happens after you end a chapter in your life, you're trying to get things rebalanced, and you're doing your best to show up for yourself even though you've just dealt with something hard? Your inner demons come out. The devil does represent inner demons. I have read for people who were raised with a certain religion that actually believes in the devil, which I was not, and I'm grateful for it, and I've watched them get terrified by this card. And I always quickly let them know, like, the devil is not coming for you. This is about your inner demons, your inner fears, your fear stories, whatever they are. Now, of course, that's still scary. You know what I mean? Like, those inner fears really can do us great harm. Those stories that come from, like, what if nobody likes me? What if, whatever. What if I can't get my needs met? What if the only way to get what I want is to do this thing that I know is bad for me? The devil is those scary, scary stories that we tell ourselves. It's our own anxiety. It's our own self-sabotage. The devil is the one. It's like, you can think of it like the angel and the devil on your shoulders, right? Where the angel's telling you to do one thing, like in the cartoons, and the devil's like telling you to do the other thing. The devil is the one who whispers things in your ears that sound very reasonable but are actually not good for you. Who whispers to you, you're not good enough, so don't even try. Who whispers to you, go ahead and do that thing that actually doesn't sit well with you morally, because it doesn't matter anyway. The world's dog eat dog. Just go ahead and do it. Who whispers to you to go against your values. Who whispers to you that you're never going to make it on your own merits. Who whispers to you that you might as well sink into whatever coping methods you have, even if you don't think they're healthy for you. I'm talking about things like addiction, behaviors that we know are unhealthy, but we do anyway. That's the devil. The devil is your own inner demons. And when the devil comes up, it means it is time. It's time to look inward, and it's time to work with those inner demons. We can't make them go away. A lot of culture is like, just yell at them, just argue. And, I find that arguing with people usually makes them argue back harder and get madder and meaner. And I think the best way to take the wind out of the sails of our inner demons is to say, like, all right, what do you have to say? And kind of approach them with this calmness, which we have just cultivated through temperance. This level of calm of like, I see that you've got a lot on your mind. I'm listening. That doesn't mean we have to do what they say. It means we're open to hearing what they have to say. And when we do that, we can begin to understand where they came from. Maybe that inner demon that's like, you're never going to be good enough and you shouldn't even try. Maybe that came because years ago when you were in chorus, your teacher told you to just lip sync instead of sing with all the rest of the class because you couldn't sing in tune. Maybe that's not true anymore. Maybe you don't have to live your life based on what one unkind person told you when you were 7, right? So when we listen and we just are like, all right, let's think this over, we begin to realize we have more choices than to just believe what our inner demons are telling us. It's actually more powerful than just fighting with them. Because generally when we're fighting with our inner demons, well, who are we fighting with? Ourselves, right? It's ourselves we have to convince. After the devil, we have the Tower. We're entering into some real bummer cards. I mentioned earlier, the Tower, card number 16 in the deck, is a lot like the Wheel of Fortune. They're sisters. The Wheel of Fortune is like, anything could happen. And the Tower's like, anything could happen. 2020 is the Tower, my friends. You know how everything just kind of plummeted into chaos? And then it kept getting weirder and more chaotic? It's like, what's on your 2020 bingo card? That's the Tower. That, like, terrifying chaos that takes away the structures and the normalcy that you were used to and replaces it with, like, now you don't know what to do. Everything's in chaos. Good luck. The Tower is often represented by a burning building. In this case, we have this really interpretation that I personally love on this card. In the Everyday Witch Tarot, this witch is standing in front of this tower with a little grin on her face, like maybe it's an inside job. And I'm here to remind you that the Tower, like every card in the deck, can have negative and positive meanings. The Tower can be like 2020, where everything that we thought was normal, everything we thought we could rely upon, goes to shit. Wow. Here's the world the way it was yesterday, and now the world is different, and now I have to learn to live in this very different world, and there's no going back, right? Oh no. However, the Tower is about breaking down old structures that can no longer hold us. In the case of 2020, in the event of a global pandemic, all of the structures that required us to be constantly face-to-face could no longer do it for us, right? Like, there was quarantine, there was suddenly a lot of focus and talk about health and how to stay safe, and different people really grappling with what that meant to them, and the world as we knew it was no longer as cut and dry as it once was. We just had to deal with the chaos and sort it out in our own ways. Now, how can the Tower be positive? When people gather together and protest and create political change. When people show up and say no to bullshit that is coming down from the systems that are in place. I'm thinking about also in 2020, the protests that erupted around police violence and police brutality towards black men, which unfortunately has been a circumstance that has been going on for at least most of my life. Is that, like, that's something I've been aware of, and I've watched our society try to grapple with. And in 2020, when so many of us were fearing for our lives, black men had to extra still fear for their lives from the officers of the law, you know, that would, like, shoot first and ask questions later. And we had uprisings at that time that were an attempt to act as foot soldiers of justice. People were showing up in groups which we weren't supposed to be doing, but it was that bad. You know, it was that frightening. They had the double fear of, like, okay, not only could COVID kill me, but this policeman who's supposed to keep me safe could kill me, you know? When we have these political uprisings to try to make right something that has been done wrong, that is the Tower acting as a force of good. That is the Tower saying we need to destroy these things that aren't working and replace them with something that is working. We need to take down the parts of the system and the structure that hurts people and replace it with something that will allow us all to thrive. So political uprising that leads to positive change, that's the Tower in a positive light. The Tower can also be super negative, and no one has a good time during the Tower. It's not generally fun. However, often where it leads you is somewhere positive, which brings me to our next card, the Star. Now that the barn has come down, I can see the moon at night. After the structures in our life that we thought we could rely upon fall down, and we realize, wow, my life was not as cut and dry as I thought it was, the things I thought were stable actually weren't stable. We perhaps have a crisis of faith around this. We also are aware of this deep, beautiful possibility that wasn't there before. Because one thing that society and structure does is it creates rules and regiments and regulations. When it comes down, as terrifying as that may be, when we lose our stability, we suddenly realize all the possibilities are ours. We are the director of our lives. The movie of our lives is happening, and we're in the director's seat. That doesn't mean that we have control over everything. It does mean that we have endless possibility, though. And that's what the Star is about. The Star is about inspiration. There's this sense, too, of, like, divine healing, that the Star gives you that sense of anything is possible. There's this beautiful song by Dar Williams called The Blessings, and it is about breaking up with someone and being in that horrible aftermath where you're like couch surfing and not knowing where your life is going and heartbroken and hurting. But then you also are in this special emotional place where something can really press your buttons in a positive way too. And she says in the song, I've got all of these birds flying off of that tree. That's the blessings. Like, you are in this place in your life where perhaps nothing is right and everything is wrong, but you can look and have such a deep appreciation for life's small beauties, for life's small gifts, for the small gift of someone else's compassion and kindness, for the small gift of a special conversation with a stranger, for the small gift of just like looking up at the sky and it being beautiful. And because you're in this primed, intense emotional state, you can actually appreciate it more than ever before. It can inspire you, it can be life-changing, or it can just help you get through. So that's the star. It is a source of both healing and inspiration. How many stories do you know, like success stories, of people who have gone after a big dream after having a horrible tower moment in their life? You know, like, well, everything was terrible. I lost my job, I lost my dog, I lost my car. And I was like, well, I better get my life back together. I don't know why I'm talking like a country song. And, you know, like, the person found inspiration in that aftermath where nothing was right, to just go after something that had always been a dream, because why not, right? And then that's how they found their success, and that's how they found their joy. The star can be that kind of like blessed surprise inspiration, and it adds this element of healing, this element of like, hey, it's bad right now, but it's going to be okay again. Remember, you can feel good too. I also look at the star as being the healing power of art. Music is something that has gotten me through very difficult times as part of why I'm a musician. It's a legit form of magic, that we can listen to a song that someone else wrote when they were feeling bad, when we are feeling bad about the same thing, and we feel better because we feel seen. And someone has taken this really hard experience and turned it into something beautiful that makes us go, oh wow, me too. And then we don't just have the beauty of the art, we have the beauty of the connection as well. That's the star, my friends. The star as a person could be someone who represents that beauty and creativity and specialness to you. The star as you represents that's the side of yourself to tune into, that part that is a little wild with possibility in the best way. After the star, we have the moon. Consider on the Fool's journey. The Fool has been through a lot right now. The Fool has had a couple of ups and downs, has learned how to check in with themselves, is kind of doing the work, you know what I mean? And yet, with this recent blow of the tower, a lot of things that they thought were true are falling apart, no longer relevant to their lives. They're lost again. Even though they've come so far, they're lost again. You've probably been at times in your life where you've felt that way, and it's very challenging. And although there are those moments of deep inspiration, there's also moments of deep questioning. And here we have the moon. The moon can represent a long, dark night of the soul. The moon can be an incredibly powerful card. It can also represent illusions. We can see on this card from the Everyday Witch Tarot that this house cat is looking into his reflection or her reflection in the water and seeing a bold panther. The moon can represent the stories we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel better instead of being willing to see the truth. I'm not here to judge that as a coping method. I think we've all done it. The moon, however, can also represent us getting in touch with our deep inner selves, intuition, or subconscious. As we're going through different challenges in life, our subconscious shows up. In fact, that's when it's most likely to drive the bus, because we're overwhelmed. The things that we shove into our subconscious do not stay there. We just don't know when they're in charge anymore because we're not conscious of them. So those parts of ourselves that we're like, this is not suitable for public consumption, I'm going to push it on down, well, that goes into our shadow selves. And when we are experiencing times of turmoil, when we're experiencing times where we're so distracted by life that we are not our best selves, that's when those elements of our subconscious come forward. And they're like, oh, I noticed you're not driving, I'll take the wheel. And then our fear stories could drive. A better part of ourselves could drive. Our inner child could drive. Kind of, we don't know at any given moment, what parts of ourselves may arise. And so the moon comes up and we really do need to do some work with our subconscious. And specifically the work is like, let's bring this into the light. Let's identify some of these motivations that are driving me right now, and let's talk about it, because we can make choice when we can see it. After the moon, we have the sun. The sun is the bright light of day. If you've just had a long dark night of the soul, where you've questioned yourself and you've tried to seek your inner truth and you've tried to learn about yourself, and that's really hard, but sometimes does lead you to some very beautiful conclusions. How many of you have had a life-altering realization at 3 in the morning on a very bad night? I have. I have had those long dark nights of the soul where everything feels terrible and I kind of hate everything, and also am low-key wishing I could sleep because I probably have to do something the next day. And oh well, like my mind won't let me rest until I figure out the thing that's going to change my life. But sometimes you really do get to that realization. Sometimes you have that long dark night of the soul and you realize, even though I really don't want to do this because it's uncomfortable, I know this is the move I have to make now. And that bright illumination makes everything okay again. It makes you realize, okay, I don't know exactly the way out, but I do know what I have to do. And now that I know I can do it, I've made my peace and I'll do it. And that's the sun. The sun is this bright illumination of like, here, I understand. I see the truth. That doesn't mean I like everything about the truth. That doesn't mean it's perfect. But it means that I see the truth, and the truth sets you free. Here's how it is, here's how it has to be, here's how I have to act. If I'm going to be in accordance with my values and beliefs, this is what I have to do. And in a way, it's very freeing and beautiful, even if you know it'll be hard. It's like, all right, blessed truth, set me free. That is the beautiful illumination of the sun. And as we lean into that, as we lean into our own truth and our own values driving the bus, having examined both the light and the dark of the situation, the world begins to feel like a warmer place again. The world begins to feel like a place that has possibility. We realize there are other people who've been through difficult times just as we have, and that we can give to each other compassionately. We can be kind to each other. We can show up as people who have been in some ways broken by life and be like, even though life has been shitty to us, I choose to be good to you. We can be the cycle breakers. We can say, I've experienced some really bad stuff. And I can't change that I've experienced that, but I can make sure that the cycle stops with me. And that's very powerful. We can seek out other people who've been through experiences like we have. Not that we're celebrating the experiences, but we do celebrate and cherish the connection from other people who understand. And being able to be uniquely kind to each other in ways that we inherently understand now because of what we've both been through. So the sun is a source of both illumination and warmth. Community worth, family warmth, people you can trust. And you learn who those people are after these long dark nights of the soul. They may be different people than you believed before, but now you begin to know. And you know who you can trust, and you know that you are one of those people. That is the sun. Now that leads us into, we only have a couple cards left, by the way. I know this has been a long one. It always is. It leads us into judgment. Judgment on the Smith-Waite deck is a scary card. It looks like Judgment Day, you know, where God is like coming out of the sky and casting judgment, and there's all these coffins around, and it's based on this concept of like now you've reached the end of your life and it's time to be judged based on everything you did in your life, which is, I think, terrifying for a lot of people. Judgment, however, to me usually represents your own wise judgment, your own discernment might be a better word for it. It represents you having been through all of this stuff, good and bad, having made mistakes, having done what you could to correct them, having dealt with the fuzzy reality that you can't always fix everything, and that things are just going to happen, good and bad, and trying to learn who you are as a person and how to show up through all of that. And that is what judgment is. Judgment is like, I don't know everything, but I know what I've learned, and I know that I can act on my values and act on my truth at this time, and that truth sets me free. And you can see on this card, judgment is depicted as a witch frolicking along a path with like a little trumpet type of thing, like singing her own tune. Finally free. Freed by singing her own song, freed by allowing her own truth to drive the bus rather than somebody else's. Judgment is about your judgment. It is about your discernment. It is about arriving at a place where you can trust your own judgment instead of needing to constantly check in with everybody else. It's that beautiful sense of freedom that comes from like, I know what I gotta do. And now we reach the world. The world's a tricky card for a lot of people because when you see it on its own, you're like, the world? When you understand it in the context of the Fool's Journey, you understand that it's the end of that story. You can think of the world like the epilogue of a book, and the world is generally a happy card. It's the end of a chapter. It is sister to death, where death is the end of a chapter, kind of in a very final, maybe even frightening way. The world is the end of a chapter in a way that allows you to linger and allows you to kind of get what you can. If death is you step through the portal, you can never go back, the world is this beautiful in-between space, this beautiful liminal space, where you reflect on how far you've come, and you reflect on your accomplishments, and you reflect on the challenges you've overcome, and you know you're moving into another chapter, but right now it's enough for you to just kind of count your blessings and count yourself as one of those blessings, to look back and learn what you can from those lessons so you don't have to repeat them, and celebrate that milestone in your life. That is the world. Completion. And that completes the Fool's Journey. That's the Major Arcana. And I've found that teaching it to students in that context of being a journey has helped both them and me, honestly, interpret these cards as they come up individually in different people's readings. You can do an entire reading for yourself with the Major Arcana. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to move into which you got this at this time. Which is one practical tip you can take away. If there is a card from the Major Arcana that is troubling you, that you're like, I don't know how the hell to interpret this, whether it's in a particular reading and you don't understand the context, or whether it is, you're just like, this card, man, this friggin' card always gives me a hard time. Here is my trick for how to deal with that. For starters, consider it in context. I'm going to give you 2 contexts. Nope, I'm going to give you 3. Context number 1, what is around the card? Can you see a story in your spread, in your reading, of what came before and what came after, so that you understand what surrounds the card, and perhaps that context helps you understand why it's there a little better? Context number 2, what question did you ask? What are you going through in life right now? Contextually, what aspect of this card is interacting with your life? And context number 3, where does this card fall in the Fool's Journey? If your card that you're struggling with is card 21, the world, and you're like, what the hell does the world mean? Perhaps the world has come up as advice. You're like, what does that mean? Well, you can know that it falls at the end of the Fool's Journey. You can know that the Fool started, and if you look, this same figure is on both cards, looking very similar actually, looking a little bit fancy-free and carefree and feeling like freedom is a buzzword here. And it's 2 different kinds of freedom. It's the freedom of, I'm naive and innocent and I'm starting something I'm excited about. And it's also the freedom of, I've completed something. I've been through so much. I've been through a lot of ups and downs, and I came out like, all right, I'm still okay. I'm still standing, and now I know myself so much better. And now I'm empowered to keep going. Stronger and smarter than I was before. That's where the world falls. Does that help you give a greater context to your reading? Does that context of understanding help you see it? And knowing that the world too falls after judgment in the Major Arcana. We have judgment, we have your beautiful self-awareness, and it lands with the world. How has your own judgment led you to where you are, and what kind of blessings can you count as you reflect on that? So that is going to be my trick for you. Consider the context. Consider the context of the card in the spread. What is around it? What has led up to it? What comes after it? Are there any other cards that seem to be looking at it or pointing to it? Because they might add some context as well. Consider the context in your life. What question did you ask? People, I notice, have often forgotten what question they asked by the end of a reading. They'll be like, what's happening in my love life? And then a card will come out, especially if it doesn't necessarily have to do with your love life, like the Hierophant. And they'll be like, well, the Hierophant means religion and society, right? And I don't understand how that fits. Well, what question did you ask? You were asking about your love life. How are religion and society affecting your love life right now? Are they making you feel like you have limited options of who you're allowed to date because you live in a restrictive culture? Are they making you feel like, you know what, I want to date someone who has shared values, so this is the direction I want to point myself? Remember the context of why you came to the cards in the first place. People often forget halfway through the reading. And 3, the context of where is this card in the context of the deck. If it's a Minor Arcana card, you can know what came before and after pretty easily. Major Arcana card as well, they're numbered. What couple of cards came before it? What led up to this circumstance in the Fool's Journey? That may help you understand it within this reading that you're looking at right now. So that is my Witch You Got This. Try this at home if you're struggling with a card. 3 ways to consider context. Where is it in the spread? What did I ask? Where is this card in the deck? What's the context as it falls in the deck, in the official numbering of the deck? And that context may help. And I'm going to suggest, a lot of people love to pull clarifying cards. That can be hard for a beginner reader, because if you're struggling with one card, the next card might give you an even bigger struggle, like you might take time to understand these cards. And sometimes you can pull enough clarifying cards that the waters get very muddy. So I'm going to suggest you consider the context before you pull a clarifier. And then go ahead and pull one if you need to. Alright, my loves, that brings us to the close of the Major Arcana. In my next episode, I will begin going through the Minor Arcana. I'm going to be going one suit at a time. I'm going to start with Earth because I'm an Earth sign. I'm going to start with Pentacles my next episode. We're going to go through the suit of Pentacles, or coins, or Earth. If you have questions, if you have ideas, if you have thoughts, please reach out to me however you desire to. I'm on all the social media as @SassafrasTarot. You can also email sassafrastarot@gmail.com if you have suggestions for a future episode, or questions or thoughts about this episode that you would like to air. I hope that you will. As always, I'm going to take you out with a song. I'm going to play you a song, the theme song actually, Magic Come In, because I think it's a kind of an appropriate kickoff for this series of cards about, of episodes about the cards, about the tarot, and because it has tarot references in it. So consider this to be the little kickoff to your own journey with the tarot cards. I will be going through the deck and sharing these meanings of the deck, and then I'm going to do at least one, maybe several episodes about how the hell to make that meaningful for you, about what it looks like to read for yourself and others, and about what it looks like to read from a perspective of empowerment, and about how to ask the right questions, which I think is deeply important. I'll be talking about these topics on and off throughout these episodes, but I'm going to be dedicating some episodes to them as well. Because I think where the rubber hits the road is when I learned the meanings of the cards, and now you're out there reading for yourself and for others, and you're trying to contextualize it in a way that feels good. We're going to do a little tune-up. This is something I do at the end of every episode. If you're new to SassafrasCast, I am also a singer-songwriter, and you can find me on the internet by searching my name, Rory Kelly, RORIE Kelly. I'm on Spotify. This song that I'm about to play is on Spotify and Apple Music and all the other places one might expect a streaming song. I also have a website, rorykelly.com. If you like my music, you can follow me in all the places. I wrote this song, Magic Come In, a little bit from a magician perspective. There's some Major Arcana review. And a Chariot perspective. That commitment to move forward, that commitment to take what I have and make it work. Even if I didn't know exactly how. And go after my dreams. Hard. That's what Magic Come In was about. And often I write these very encouraging songs because I'm the one who needs them. You know what I mean? And I hope if you have something you're pushing towards in life, even if you don't know exactly how you're going to get there, I hope this card reminds you that you've got a lot of magic within you to share. And to trust that that's going to be enough for this journey. There are times when she knows that this life is not enough. All the dough, platitudes, and the world can't make it so. Working hard every day for the bill she still can't pay. She RPGs late at night into someone else's life. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight? Oh, there's magic coming. There's magic coming. There's magic coming. Get ready for the rest of your life. When's it gonna be my turn? When's it gonna turn around? When am I gonna wake up happy, knowing what I found? When's it gonna turn around? Yeah. When's it gonna be my turn? When am I gonna wake up happy, knowing what I learned? Oh, hey. And she lays out the cards to see how the day will be, and she turns with a sigh. It's another one of these, but the wind blows strong now. She knows it's only time, just a matter of time, until she spreads her wings and flies. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight? Oh, there's magic coming. There's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Get ready for the rest of your life. When's it gonna be my turn? When's it gonna turn around? When am I gonna wake up happy, knowing what I found? When's it gonna turn around? Yeah. When's it gonna be my turn? When am I gonna wake up happy, knowing what I learned? And she lays her head tonight, and she knows it's still not time, but she dreams with the power of a phoenix and flames, and she thinks that she begins to understand what she has inside. It's not a thing to disavow, it's not to fix, it's not to take home. There's magic coming. There's magic coming. There's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight? Oh, oh, oh. There's magic coming. There's magic coming. There's magic coming. Get ready for the rest of your life. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you for kicking off this new tarot mini-series and the podcast with me. I really hope that the tarot becomes like a special resource for you to begin to make choices that feel really positive and empowering and reflect on your own inner self. Because that's what it's been for me. It's been the source of growth throughout the years, regardless of what I believed. And I've believed different things at different times about what the cards meant and what they could do. And a million people have a million different beliefs about tarot cards. But for my whole adult life, they have been this source of healing and help and context. And they've helped me understand my life and understand myself and move forward in kind of an energy of growth. And that's what I want them to do for you. Have a wonderful everybody. I'll talk to you again soon.